Good morning again. Good morning, and thank you all for coming out again today in what continues to be a very historic, unprecedented flood event here in South Louisiana. As yesterday, we're gonna have a list of speakers, and then we will take questions. I will be followed in a few minutes by Colonel Edmondson of Louisiana State Police. Then it'll be Colonel Wascom, the head of GOSEP, General Curtis to talk about the Louisiana National Guard, Dr. Sean Wilson from the Department of Transportation, then Marquita Walters with the Department of Children and Family Services, and finally, for the prepared remarks today will be Commissioner of Administration Jay Darden. I just want to let everyone know that obviously this is a serious event. It is ongoing. It is not over. Even with the sunshine out today, intermittently, the waters are going to continue to rise in many areas, and so this is no time to let the guard down. We actually have to remain vigilant, and I'm encouraging everyone to refrain from getting out and sightseeing today. That would put a lot of additional demands on limited resources that we are trying to direct towards continued search and rescue operations. Again, we are still in the response phase of this flood event. But Louisiana is very resilient. We have strong, faithful people here, and I am extremely encouraged by the amount of cooperation we have gotten from people. We see folks who are truly being neighbors to one another, and that is very gratifying. It's incredibly important at times like this, too. I also want to thank all of the local first responders who have partnered with state agencies, and they are providing tremendous service to their constituencies around South Louisiana. I was able yesterday to get on the ground in Tangipahoa Parish and St. Helena Parish and Livingston Parish, and had many conversations with leaders elsewhere, and I can tell you there are a lot of heroic efforts going on by volunteers, by first responders, and certainly a lot of that has been caught on media, and so you know what I'm talking about. Since this time yesterday, the storm has actually subsided in its intensity, and it has moved to the west, and that's going to continue. And obviously the rainfall that is happening over towards Lafayette and Point South and over towards Opelousas and Lake Charles is problematic. But the good news is the rainfalls are not as heavy as they were when that storm system was over central and southeastern Louisiana. I do want to warn everybody that because the ground is so saturated, even a typical summer afternoon thunderstorm has the potential to cause flooding. Or recurrence of flooding in those areas that have already experienced it. And so I want everyone to be mindful of that and to take the necessary precautions. Further, we are still having historic records of flooding with respect to the levels of the rivers, and the cresting is starting to happen, but those crests are moving south very slowly, and so there are areas that have not seen maximum floodwaters yet, and as those waters move towards the south, I think we're going to see more and more areas inundated with water. There will be road closures where today they may be open, or at the moment they may be open. So I'm advising all motorists to be very, very careful as you travel. And just because there's no road closure sign doesn't mean it's safe to proceed if you see water in front of you. As we said yesterday, it's much better to turn around than it is to drown. And obviously we don't want anyone out there sightseeing. However, if you are advised to evacuate, please do that. Again, just because your home has never taken on water doesn't mean that it won't. And in fact, that is happening over and over in the areas where we've already had to do evacuations. And so don't wait until it's too late, because when you do that, you put yourself at risk, and then you require us to use first responders to come out and to enable you when they should be deployed elsewhere. I do want to let you all know that about 30 minutes ago, I did talk to the FEMA Region 6 director and requested a major federal disaster declaration for all affected parishes. We should be hearing back from them in the very near future. And if any additional parishes are needed to be added, we will do that as needed going forward. At this point in time, and it's very hard to get the numbers straight because we have local first responders who are making rescues as well as our state agencies. But we know that there have been well over 7,000 people who have been rescued and over 500 pets have been rescued. The number of fatalities remains at 3 in terms of storm-related fatalities, and we believe there may be one more individual who is unaccounted for, and that search continues in St. Helena Parish. We have FEMA on the ground as we speak, making damage assessments, and it's very important for everyone out there in your homes to document the damage that you sustained from this flood event. Take pictures. That's the easiest thing. Everybody knows that a picture's worth 1,000 words. When it comes to documenting damages in your home, that is certainly the case. So we'd ask you to do that. We also want you to call the Red Cross if you can volunteer to help. We have a lot of needs that are cropping up, and we need volunteers. And so if you have the opportunity to do that, we would ask you to call the Red Cross at 855-489-4528, or you can sign up at volunteerlouisiana.gov. So my final words before I give the podium to Colonel Edmondson is to just ask everyone to be patient. We're not in control as to how fast these floodwaters recede, and in fact they are still going up in many places. We have a lot of areas where we have high density populations, where we have basically islands have been created, and it makes it very difficult for people to get out, and it also makes it very difficult for first responders and sometimes to get in. So we're asking everyone to be patient. Surely the waters are going to recede over time, so everyone please just be very cautious out there. Let's not make decisions that actually cause problems. Let's make good decisions that alleviate problems that already exist. So I'm going to be followed by Colonel Edmondson, and at the end of Commissioner Darden's comments, we will take questions.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for the leadership of you and your team. As I stand here before y'all just a few minutes ago, we're working fatality on I-10 in the Butte-LaRose, Gross-Ted area, eastbound. It's a multiple vehicle fatality. At least one is dead. It is not weather related at this point, but we have one lane of that interstate that's open, and we realize that that's a main thoroughfare for people coming west into the Baton Rouge area. So we've got one lane that's open in that. I do want to tell you, we've all been doing this a long time, and to sit here as we grieve through and got so many different phone calls throughout the night, is we've got to make a decision based on human life versus quality of life. We get phone calls from people that are stranded in their homes, that are scared, that are worried, and the bottom line is we're trying to get to those individuals, and we work very hard and diligently to get there. The bottom line, we've had to redirect our resources throughout the night, especially in the Flannery Road area. We were working an evacuation of a nursing home in the Livingston area, and then 3 in the Flannery area where we were actually moving patients out. And then we had to redeploy resources to Ochsner Hospital on I-12. So that's why you see a lot of movement. If you see movement, whether it's a National Guard envoy or Wildlife and Fisheries or State Police, because we're trying to place assets in an area that we can get to you. Here's the bottom line is, if you've called us, if you've gotten information out, 911, it's still, I know it's not working in some areas and it's been intermittent, but they're working on that in those areas it's not working, and still use 911. We understand with the cell phones that are out right now, those AT&T users, if you are in a Wi-Fi and you're calling somebody in a Wi-Fi, so tell them to turn that on, it's FaceTime audio. And that is a mechanism in place. We're utilizing that on social media to get information out and also to make those phone calls. So please, we're trying to look at every single area we can get communication, because that's what's most important to us. Our critical resources now, we have over 1,000 vehicles on I-12 in Albany. They've been there since yesterday. they spent the night there. I have 5 troopers that are on the ground with them. So believe me, everything that's going on there, we're monitoring. If you see the helicopters moving in that area, those helicopters are deploying water and food to those people on the interstate. Early on during the day yesterday, we attempted to move some people out. They wanted to stay there with the cars because we can't get to the cars. The biggest problematic areas and the reason we can't get to some locations is because you have deep pockets of water, then you have land, then you have deep pockets of water. So the wildlife and fisheries and the agents and everyone, fire marshal's office and firemen that have these boats, they've got to move them through that water, then they've got to pick them up, if you can imagine that, and move them to the next water. Well, it might be several hundred yards to do that. So that's the issues in place we're dealing with. High water vehicles, we can move them. We're moving to those areas. We've gone from both locations on I-12 of the interstate to get resources and food and water in those areas. We'll continue to do that. We're assessing the needs of any critical needs, whether it's children or elderly people or those that have become sick. We're trying to get those people out of the Interstate 12 area. We're going to continue to do work that. I think in the break in the weather has actually allowed us to deploy some resources there. So you'll see state police helicopters. You'll see some Black Hawk helicopters probably later in the day as we try to move people out. But again, it's a quality of life and death situation that we've got to make based on getting people in those areas. I have to tell you that if you don't need to be out, you've heard that now for several days, that's still the message. If you don't need to be out, please stay in your home. I mean, that's the best place for you if you're in a dry area. Other than that, if you know the water's coming up, and you know that, you know the areas that don't have water, they've been telling you that it's moving, now is the time to move out, because if you don't do it now, then it becomes a rescue mission later on. And I will tell you, at night, when it gets dark and you lose electricity, it's an eerie feeling, and we understand that and we get that, and we're trying to deploy every single one. But think of the resources that's there if you can get out now. So I ask you to heed that. I ask you to listen to us as we move forward. We're going to continue to give information. Our social media is the best way for us to get information out to you. So please keep, whether it's a GoSEP site, whether it's lsp.org, Facebook, we're pumping out as much information so that you know from a transparency effort that you know exactly what we're doing. So we'll be here answering any questions y'all might have after this. Thank you, Governor.
Colonel Watson.
Thank you, Governor. Ladies and gentlemen, just to reemphasize, the Governor spoke this morning. This is, we've eclipsed the marks from back in March, which we set records then, so I don't need to harp on that very much. But as Colonel Evans said, we're very much still in the search and rescue mode. So if you don't have to leave your home and you're safe, please stay there. We were rescuing people all throughout the night. I'd like to say a special thank you to all the first responders that have literally come from all over the state to come in here and assist Baton Rouge and Livingston Parish, St. Helena, and Tangipahoa especially. There's a lot ongoing as well as we speak in Lafayette Parish, Vermilion Parish, and on to the west. There are current search and rescue operations going on there. I think the last count we had was over 2,000 homes in Lafayette Parish alone impacted. So we're dealing with that not only here with the ongoing evacuations that Colonel Edmondson said last night, but we're still dealing with that. So we're still in the response mode. Having said that, we are coordinating with our federal partners. As the Governor said, he's been in contact with FEMA Region 6 Administrator Tony Robinson. Mr. Jerry Stoller, Federal Coordinating Officer for Louisiana, is here with us. He has traveled with the Governor yesterday. He has taken pictures and video of the damaged areas to paint our picture for our federal partners back in Washington, and we expect to get that word back from them real soon. So with that, Governor, thank you for the opportunity, thank you for the leadership, and I think Colonel Edmondson hit most of it. Call your local parish officials, keep trying them, they're very busy, and we'll continue to respond.
Thank you very much. General Curtis.
All right. Thank you, Governor. The Governor has given the National Guard tremendous flexibility to bring in the people and move forward resources that we need to help our first responders and locals get ourselves out of a bad situation and basically save lives. And that's what we're focused on, as mentioned earlier, is saving lives at this point, and then we'll get into reducing suffering. We currently have about 1,700 guardsmen that are mobilized and that are in the affected area all across South Louisiana. I will tell you those numbers will build up towards 2,000 and possibly up towards 2,500 as additional requests come in. We're engaged from Tangipahoa Parish all the way across I-10 into Lafayette and on west towards Lake Charles, providing whatever support is required. And it's high water vehicles, boats, helicopters, as mentioned earlier. We're trying to move food and water now to the people on I-12 so that they can sustain themselves, until we get them off of the interstate system. We are looking into the future. Some of the soldiers we will bring on is to help the local municipalities hopefully get a little bit of rest and be able to think a little clearer. And those are called governmental support teams that can help in planning and help give those people a spell. But we also will bring on military police and additional soldiers that can provide security so we can give police officers a chance to rest and check on their homes. With that, Governor, that's it.
Thank you very much. Sean?
Thank you, Governor. Good morning. I will first tell you that the best place to get the most accurate and up-to-date information about road closures is 511la.org. Oftentimes, folks are participating and wanting to call and share information. Things are constantly changing and evolving. As we've said before throughout this press conference, water will continue to move south. We still have the interstate to deal with, whereas I-12 is closed from US 61 all the way to 190 in the Covington-Mandeville area. So that entire stretch is closed, so we would advise you to heed 511 as well as the dynamic message boards. And if folks are outside of Louisiana, you're traveling across I-10, we would encourage you to consider your path, check the information on the websites and social media to take I-59 up to 20 and or 10 perhaps if you have to go that way. But most importantly, I will tell you, if you do not have to drive, don't. And here's why. We've got over 30 washouts on our system, and that's just the state roads. We have several miles, over 200 closures of road that is not accessible because of high water. We've got 3 lives lost already in the state. That's 3 too many. And so when you venture into high water or water that may not appear to be high because you're comfortable driving it and you're familiar with it, please take note that that is not the wise thing to do. So as we begin to finalize the response effort and move into recovery, folks are going to want to get out and go places. Please don't, because our roads are not always passable. We don't know if we have everything done as stuff is coming in and being reported to us right now. And I will tell you that we've got over 1,400 critical bridges that after any event like this, we have to inspect before trucks, buses, and passenger vehicles will cross those bridges. And so we're in the process already of inspecting those. We've inspected over 100, Governor. And I will also tell you that as we go out and make all of these assessments, folks are going to want to start to bring debris and things to the road. We have already got positions, contracts in position to do that, to begin to handle that, but that's going to be in the response, in the recovery phase, not the response phase, as we look to save life and property first and foremost. So last but not least, remember 511la.org is the most up-to-date information, and I would also want to acknowledge every department has family members who are impacted by this high water. DOTD has several folks who work in those districts that may be in shelters, Governor, and are showing up for work, doing the best they can to help their citizens. And so on behalf of the entire state, I want to thank those employees who are sacrificing and doing that as well.
Thank you. And Secretary Walters.
Good morning. There are many people across our area tonight and today that have been in shelters. We have over 5,000 people, 5,050 spent the night in shelters last night. There are over a dozen parish-run shelters open, and then there are a lot of Red Cross shelters. I'm not going to read those to you, but we have the list and we'll give them to you. As Red Cross is coming to excuse me, capacity with their own volunteer pool, if you would like to volunteer, I want to reiterate the number that the Governor gave you. It's 1-855-489-2528. That is if you want to volunteer at a Red Cross shelter, and they can still use volunteers, so we appreciate that. They're training people in as they come. We are building capacity in the Baton Rouge area to take on more people today. We are bringing assets in from other parts of the state so that we can keep you as comfortable as possible if you have to be in a shelter. We know that there were people last night that didn't have cots. that had to sleep on the floor, and we are so sorry for that. We are working as fast as we can to get you the basic comforts of food and shelter and a cot and a pillow and a blanket so that you'll be comfortable when you have to come to the shelter. As you've heard all of my colleagues say, this is a fast-moving, ever-changing operation. And just as one shelter stands up, water comes and we have to move people out of that shelter to another shelter. So we are working diligently with all of our partners. I know some of you didn't have your pets with you, and that's very distressing when you have to evacuate and you can't bring your pet with you. We are working with agriculture and with corrections to make sure that we have pet shelters up so that those little furry creatures that you love can be taken care of while you go get some rest, and then we'll get you reunited at the right time. And Governor, thank you.
Thank you. Jay?
Thank you, Governor. We're going to close 27 state offices tomorrow in 27 parishes. Obviously, the areas that have already been affected, as well as several parishes to the southwest that are expected to get some rain over the course of today and perhaps tomorrow. Those parishes are as follows: Acadia, Ascension, Assumption, Beauregard, Cameron, Calcasieu, East Baton Rouge, East Feliciana, Evangeline, Iberia, Iberville, Jefferson Davis, Lafayette, Livingston, Point Capee, St. Charles, St. Helena, St. James, St. Landry, St. Martin, St. Tammany, Tangipahoa, Vernon, Vermilion, Washington, West Baton Rouge, and West Feliciana. So those state offices will be closed tomorrow. If you are not impacted by the storm right now, particularly in the Baton Rouge area, and you're a state worker and can help, I'd urge you to contact your supervisor and see if there's something that you can do. And just to reiterate what Marquita said, we are in need of volunteers, but you need some direction as to where to go rather than simply trying to show up somewhere. The real message is to stay off the roads so that emergency vehicles and first responders can continue the rescue effort. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. And with that, we are going to open the conference up for questions.
Have you requested a federal disaster declaration from the president yet on this, or is there a procedure that we have
No,
to wait?
well, the procedure is what we're following. I made a verbal request of the FEMA Region 6 director this morning. And we expect to hear back very shortly as to whether that request will be granted. I expect that it will be, and again, that's for all of the affected parishes. And should we need to expand the list of parishes going forward, we're going to do that. Yes, sir.
I've been contacted by parents who have medically fragile children, and they're wanting to know what resources could they have for finding shelter and things like that.
Well, I'm going to let Marquita come up and talk about the shelters. I can tell you that we have the Department of Health that is in the process now of standing up a medical needs shelter. And the information about that shelter will be coming forth very shortly. But Marquita, with respect to the fragile children.
The medical needs shelter is the best place to take those children. 911 is still your best access to get to them because then they can route the appropriate ambulance or transport to get them there. We are working very, very closely with the LDH, and we'll get that medical needs shelter open hopefully today somewhere on LSU's campus. That is the goal.
Secretary, that number you gave for a number of people in shelters, is that just parish-run shelters? Is that all shelters in the region?
The 5,000 is all parish and Red Cross shelters right now. And that number was of 6 o'clock this morning, and it changes rapidly. But that was both groups of shelters.
And we have shelters that have sprung up unofficially throughout this region. Churches are deciding to offer shelters, so we don't necessarily, in fact, we can tell you we're not capturing those numbers. And in fact, one of the challenges that we've had is in a number of cases, we've had churches and other community organizations to offer a shelter, and they start sheltering people, and then it has to be evacuated because it's experiencing flooding too. So those numbers are not captured. Yes, sir.
Is the one at Celtic Studios official?
I'm sorry.
Is the one at Celtic Studios an official?
Yes, it is an official shelter, and in fact, we will probably be using that shelter to a greater degree going forward at Celtic Studios. Well, Colonel Edmondson gave you an update. We have individuals at both ends of I-12, but the primary area where there's a problem is on the eastern end between Holden and the Tangipahoa Parish line, where we have virtual islands that have been created by deep water, and they've got motorists out there stranded. We've had state police officers with those individuals since late yesterday afternoon, and understandably, most of those individuals, they were offered an opportunity to be taken away from those sites and sheltered, but they're choosing to stay with their vehicles. And so at this point, we didn't have a good way to get them food and water yesterday, but we are making sure that that happens today. And we're going to be using a lot of aircraft for that, because it's still very difficult for the reasons that Colonel Edmondson told you about to get to them in these high water vehicles in the boats, because of these multiple areas of flooding on the interstate that you actually have to get across in order to get to them. Yes,
Is there an exact estimate on how many homes have been flooded across the state?
no, but it's in the thousands.
And also for the communities where, for instance, a lot of grocery stores are closed and people simply can't access grocery stores or food, I mean, what sort of resources are there for that?
Well, that is obviously going to be a challenge. We hope that grocery stores where the roads are good are going to be open, and that so people will be able to access that. Obviously, we are moving food and water primarily to our shelters to make sure that those individuals who are totally separated from their homes and from their provisions are going to have food and water. And as we see situations where the water is receding, we're expecting more and more of the stores to come back online and to be open. Yes, ma'am.
To what, have you guys been in discussion with AT&T? Do we know when people will be getting their cell service back? And to what extent is that impacting or affecting your ability to help people?
Well, it affects communications, whether people are trying to request help or whether we're trying to communicate with people to make sure that we're directing assets correctly. It does present a problem. One of the AT&T switching facilities on Choctaw Drive took water, and it's been knocked out. We got word a short while ago that they're assessing the damage now to see how quickly they can stand that switching facility back up. And they are also mobilizing a mobile switching facility, but it does have to come in from out of state. And so that's going to be a while to take place. In the meantime, Colonel Edmondson was asking people, if you have access to Wi-Fi, you can, through the audio feature of your FaceTime, use the internet in order to place calls. And so we're encouraging people to do that. If you have a cell phone service that is not AT&T, chances are your phone's working, but if you're calling someone who has an AT&T phone, then you're right back with a problem. But we are working to get that service restored just as quickly as possible. And as you imagined with your question, it does present problems on both ends.
Last question.
We're seeing a lot of prison buses around town. Are the inmates being removed, or
No.
those buses?
No, we did evacuate the Livingston Parish Jail yesterday, but there are no further evacuations in progress or anticipated at this time.
Governor, the weather people have called this storm a hurricane without the winds. I'm just curious from a strategic standpoint and how you all are dealing with this disaster. Is this worse than a hurricane? Because folks didn't really have a warning to get out.
Well, I don't want to say it's worse than a hurricane. It's just plenty bad. You know, if we had had a hurricane, we would probably have a lot more physical damage to our infrastructure, to buildings and to homes. We would have a lot more power outages, and thank goodness we don't. The simple fact of the matter here is we're breaking records. And anytime you break a record, the National Weather Service cannot tell you what you can expect in the way of the floodwaters, how wide they're going to be and how deep they're going to be. They just tell you if you're anywhere close to these rivers and to these creeks, that you need to be very, very cautious and you need to evacuate as it becomes obvious that your house could, not that it already has, but that it could go underwater. And so we're going to use this data that we're accumulating now to inform decisions going forward, because we will now know what will happen with this level of rainfall in the future. But I don't want to compare this to a hurricane or not a hurricane. It's just plenty bad. The other thing is, if it was a hurricane, we would not be locating shelters in the area. And it's a whole lot easier to do it in the area because people are more willing to go to the shelter. They know they're closer to home, they're closer to other relatives and friends. And so I don't want to even sound like I'm asking for a hurricane at this point. I'm not. We're satisfied that this situation is presenting as many challenges as we want to deal with right now. We're going. But also, I'm satisfied that the response from the state agencies, from the local agencies, and from community organizations and volunteers has been tremendous. An awful lot of work, and you know, the people who are paid first responders are doing an excellent job. We have volunteer firemen out there working around the clock for days at a time to make rescues, and then we just have a lot of people being good neighbors. We always knew that Louisiana was full of good people, and we are seeing that right now. I'm just asking people as we move forward and through the remainder of this flood event that they remain patient and that they follow the warnings that they're giving as to whether they need to evacuate or whether they need to stay off the roads. Because if you don't evacuate when you should, or if you get on the roads when you should not, you are further taxing our ability to respond to people who are in an emergency not of their own making. So we ask that you just be patient and do as you're asked to do from the authorities. With that, we will let y'all know when the next press conference is, and thank you very much.